People sentenced in the 80s-2000s. What modern world change shocked you the most? I knew a guy who was in prison from about 1999 or 2000 for about 12-13 years. When he got out, he did a few odd jobs for my family. My mum was friends with his parents and was helping him earn money for stuff like mowing the lawn and cleaning, etc. While he was over, we found that he had no idea how to use Google, how to find a phone number in his phone contacts, and barely knew how to send a text message. We helped him out with a few of those skills, but lost touch a while later. I'm not sure where he is these days. I remember helping a guy who went in 2005, got released 2014, had a black and green AudioVox phone in his effects and asked where he could activate it. I had to explain that it wouldn't be happening, lol. Like 3 months later, you know, I like the iPhone but I'm gonna wait for the release of the newest one. Adapted pretty quick. No matter what year you go in, when you come out and stand on carpet for the first time is the most disturbing feeling. Oh whoa, I felt this one. And darkness. Being able to be in 100% darkness again freaked me the F out for a while. I hired a guy that was released after 17 years, circa 2005. A week after he started working, he bought a phone. He had a childlike wonder with push to talk and texting. A week later, he was pissed off that he couldn't text his order into Hungry Howie's. I remember getting the bus years ago and this old bloke got on, heading away from town center towards the more residential areas. Without a second thought, he sparked up a cigar. One of the passengers told him you can't smoke on a bus. He apologized and quickly stubbed it out but said he got discharged from prison that day. And when he went in, you could smoke anywhere you wanted, so this was a massive culture shock to him. You have been sentenced to 10 years for smoking on the bus. Or fuck. A co-worker a few years ago had spent 10 years in jail. He got out right when Bluetooth headsets for phones were huge. He'd talk about all the random conversations he thought people were trying to have with him, and smartphones freaked him the hell out. My uncle went away when fanny packs were in, and when he got out in the mid-2000s we had to break the news to him. Knew a guy who was blown away by digital cameras. He had purchased an old, terrible one and couldn't get over how amazing it was. Prisoner transfer I did one time for this man who was sentenced to life in 1968. And it's the first time he'd driven past the CN Tower in Toronto and he couldn't believe how tall it was. That and he was blown away by how many different car brands there were. Got a call from a woman filing a claim on some abandoned funds. I got all her information and then asked for an email address and she said, "What's email? I keep hearing about it. But you gotta understand, I've been in prison a long time. I'm honestly surprised there aren't mandatory classes in prison that help keep people up to date on current events and technologies." My cousin's husband, that she married while he was serving 10 years beginning around 2008, wanted the first thing he did as a free man was to go to Hollywood Video and rent movies to watch with her. Then she blew his mind with Netflix. At least the idea of Netflix and chill wasn't far from his original plan, but he was shocked about there not being video stores anymore. Not me, but my father. I remember him trying to flip a CD upside down and put it back into the CD player like you would do with a record because it was skipping. Didn't notice how much of a big deal that must have been to him at the time. Adjusting to life on the outside can be really tough. My friend's older brother was jailed in 1994 and served 15 years. He said when he went in, anyone with an in-car phone was super rich, and to then see absolutely everyone have a completely cordless, pocket-sized phone was amazing. He also said that all the TV adverts had websites to visit, or were for completely online stores, which were a bit of an alien concept, as he'd never really seen or used the internet. He also found the chip and pin process of paying for things on a bank card extremely exciting. Communication. It used to be only the rich had phones. Now even kids have phones. Not me personally, but we had an older guy rent out a room in our house a few years back. Usually we rented it out to students, but someone let us know that he had just moved to our city and needed something temporary until he found permanent accommodation. It was a bit frustrating because this guy would not use the internet to search for a car or place to live. Didn't know how it worked and didn't trust it. We tried to help him learn how because we thought he was just old and stubbornly resisted technology, but no. Turns out that he had spent 11.5 years in maximum security prison after being framed for murder in the mid-90s. Came out with trust issues and a dislike for the new internet. I was talking to a lady who runs the education for a federal prison in Florida. She said when they start getting rambunctious or off topic, she mentions a new feature of the newest iPhone and all of a sudden they are very interested in what she has to say again. That's pretty clever. My friend got out of jail recently and was blown away by how many LEDs are everywhere and how many stores are using insane amounts of LED billboards. I asked a friend what the hardest thing was for him readjusting to being free again. This is a roundabout of what he said. Closing doors. I'd leave the fridge open every time without fail for months. You're not allowed to open or shut anything for yourself and I'd accidentally let the pets outside by forgetting I needed to close the front door. Someone else had opened in front of me. You forget the last one in Rule Act and have to learn it all again. What was the thing you found you liked the most? Candy Crush. Gets phone back out and starts playing. 5 minutes later exclaim they've leveled up excitedly. So sweet. A friend said his dad's friend tried VR after about 30 years in prison for like second-degree murder or something and he got scared, fell over and broke the headset. My friend just came home 2 weeks ago, and I tried to prepare him the best I knew how for the excessive use of cell phones by everyone. I explained that he's going to be amazed by the amount of people glued to looking at their phone 24/7. In the store, in the car, on the sidewalk, sitting in the house watching TV, like literally all the time. I also let him know that the technology is going to be really different since he went in over 13 years ago. So cell phones were still flip phones and definitely not as interactive, touch screens, and internet accessible. Needless to say, the second day home he called me angry as fuck. LOL, he hated how he felt stupid and how he felt like a child because he could barely figure out how to call someone, let alone video chat FaceTime. At one point he couldn't figure out how our phone call ended up on the radio when his friend turned on the car. Not me. But one of the most astounding changes I heard one of my dad's friends talking about is how having big asses was shameful and all models were flat. Now it's the other way around. So mix a lot's impact, I'd assume. At college, I bumped into a guy at a bus stop who did 20 years and had just gotten out the previous week. He struck up the conversation by talking about cell phones, and how it was that we could talk with anyone by staring at a computer we could fit in our pocket. The concept baffled him. I had to explain the concept of why texting can be easier than calling. He told me that the thing that surprised him most, however, was how awful it was to watch the news. He hadn't been able to watch TV behind bars, and so was amazed and disappointed at how partisan and ridiculous news shows had become. What happened with Lego? They used to be simple. Oh come on. I know you know what I'm talking about. Lego was simple. Something happened out here while I was inside. Harry Potter Lego. Star Wars Lego. Complicated kits. Tiny little blocks. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, I just wanna know what happened. How kids toy becoming so creative and better. Hey, I used to play dirt and running around like chimpanzee. In many ways, simple things are more creative because they leave space for your imagination. My late husband was absolutely blown away that he could order food to be delivered to him. We lived in a big city, so anything he wanted he could get it. He was so used to Chinese food being the only thing that he was just mind blown. It made his house arrest a lot easier. I was pretty surprised at the rise of e-commerce. I never thought it would be more convenient than a brick and mortar store. I was sentenced to some community service in 1997 for a traffic violation. My dad once hired a dude who just got out of prison to work with him for a day. He got in somewhere in the late 80s and was released early 10s. It was like 2 months after he got out. And my dad said jokingly told him, I bet you was surprised when you heard about Michael Jackson. He said yeah. His death was a real tragedy. My dad said no. The kid diddling thing. My dad said he never saw such shock on a person when he showed him the articles. Most people sentenced for that long probably never even heard if read it. My first job, I worked with this guy who went to prison for a long time. I think he was on parole at the time. Dude made some pretty messed up choices. Selling heroin and coke. I think he threatened to murder his ex-wife. Anyway, this was around 2012 and we chatted often. When the radio played in the store he would only sing the songs from the 90s. I always thought it was because he liked that music the most. No. That was the last music he heard before going to prison for years. He didn't know what Google was. He didn't know YouTube. What's a Facebook? Never heard of Twitter. He barely knew how to operate the internet at all. It was so shocking to me to meet someone who was much older than me. I wanna say late 30s, early 40s, and not know these things. Anytime I hear Hootie and the Blowfish or Blues Traveler, I always see his face in my mind, just singing along. He had a really good attitude with things. He really wanted to put himself on the right track, and I hope he did. I wonder what happened to him. Obligatory not me. But in the early 2000s I worked with a guy that was sentenced in the mid-80s and had just come out. He told me the first time he went to a men's room he spent several minutes looking for the handle to flush. Motion sensor toilets were completely alien to him. Motion sensor toilets is still completely alien to me. I thought you meant he didn't know what to do with the button flush, or the 3 seashells.